Newsletters are an amazing channel. They're the most valuable place to have an audience. And you have consistent reach. It's so powerful. But the model that companies use, they would send the newsletter every day and they would have, 1 to 2 or 3 ads in the newsletter. And that was the entire business model. It was just an advertising business model. As far as acquisitions, Morning Brew was acquired for 75 million. The Hustle was acquired for 30 million plus. Milk Road, we got acquired for 7 figures after 10 months.
What else do you say to someone that's looking to get started with a newsletter? What should they be doing?
Start publishing content on somewhere where you can get more immediate feedback and create things that you're interested in talking about that you think help people. And through publishing consistently every week, you'll nail down more like what people really like that you'll build your niche around.
Today's guest has seen it all. From working under Sam Parr at The Hustle to building Milk Road from 0 to 7 figures in just 10 months.
The Milk Road and The Hustle were both acquisitions where I worked at those companies. They were really good at SEO and monetizing SEO traffic with affiliate offers.
And he's now advising the biggest newsletter operators in the world. Matt McGarry is the newsletter guy.
We grew to 2.5 million newsletter subscribers. We got acquired for tens of millions of dollars. I worked at the company that acquired us, and I quit that job at that software company to go and start my own business helping other newsletter publishers.
So join us on today's episode as Matt breaks down exactly how to start, grow, and monetize a newsletter in 2025.
Think about how you're going to use email to grow, engage, and monetize your audience. And then there's kind of two sides to that. So one is newsletter, which I consider value-based editorial email. So 80-90% of the newsletter is content that's going to help somebody, inform them. And then 10% is call to actions.
Plus, how the best newsletters make millions with tiny teams, the new rules of growth after Apple's privacy changes.
There's so many more people building really cool businesses that are doing 6 or 7 figures in annual profits for themselves with small teams.
Why ad-only newsletters are dying, and how to turn your audience into revenue with products, cohorts, or sponsors.
Monetize that audience, sell products, sell sponsorships. It is helpful to use paid ads when you want to go from 10K to 100K or more, but people should be more focused on the ROI they get from the ads and not just the list size they get from the ads, because list size really doesn't matter as much as a lot of people think.
So if you're a founder, creator, or marketer who wants to own your audience and stop renting attention, then this is the episode for you. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. Matt, welcome to the podcast. It is great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get straight into it. I want to know your kind of backstory. How did you get involved in the newsletter space and what led you to starting GrowLetter?
Yeah, it's a long story I can make short, but I think back towards 2017, I started discovering what I call newsletter businesses or newsletter creators. So a lot of people might know companies like The Hustle, Morning Brew, The Skim. And then there's a lot of creators who have built big businesses off newsletters like Ben Settle, James Altucher. James Clear, the best-selling author, has a massive 2 million plus person newsletter. And I was kind of young and naive, and I was like, oh, this is cool. You send an email every day, you make money. And it seems like something I can do because I was already working in digital marketing. So I started my own newsletter, had no clue the ins and outs of it and how it really worked. It's still a great model, but there is just, more sophistication that I need to learn. So I shut that newsletter down because I made every mistake in the book, but I kept studying, kept researching. Eventually that research I sent to a guy named Sam Parr, who's the founder of The Hustle, which led to a job there. That company, we grew to 2.5 million newsletter subscribers. We got acquired for tens of millions of dollars. I worked at the company that acquired us for a while too. And eventually I got to the point where a lot of people were asking me questions and asking me for help or services. And I quit that job at that software company to go and start my own business helping other newsletter publishers.
Okay, interesting. How has the space changed since those kind of early days when you first started to get interested in it?
Yeah, there's so many changes because newsletters are, they're within digital media, and media has probably been disrupted more than any industry. So one change that happened in 21 was Apple Mail privacy protection, where open rate tracking became unreliable. And so that used to be it still is for many people, the go-to metric. What's my open rate, et cetera. But that doesn't matter as much anymore. Another one is, we've found, especially since 2022, newsletters are an amazing channel. They're the most valuable place to have an audience because you have a direct connection. You can send a message, reach in them anytime, and you have consistent reach. Usually every week your newsletter or your emails, they're going to reach about the same people or more. If you're growing, they're going to get about the same open rate, the same number of clicks, the same conversions, sales, etc. So it's so powerful. But the model that companies like Morning Brew, The Hustle, The Skim use was what we call like a newsletter advertising business. Some people even call it a newsletter first media business, where basically the primary way they made money, and sometimes the only way, like Morning Brew, for example, was they would send the newsletter every day and they would have, one to two or three ads in the newsletter. And that was the entire business model. It was just an advertising business model. And after 2022, we went into this kind of advertising recession across all of digital media, and the newsletters that really came out of that successful, or even just the businesses that came out of that successful, they found ways to monetize their audience directly. Whereas the ones that were just stuck in the, I'm just going to have ads in my newsletter and that's my only business model, that doesn't work as well as it used to. Those are some of the big like industry wide changes, but there's a ton more.
In terms of you as a consumer, are you still kind of, you mentioned there Ben Settle, Altucher, are you still a kind of fan of other newsletters, and what are you reading today?
Yeah, there's stuff that like I read for fun and learning, and there's stuff that I read for like studying and to use. So I love Stratechery by Ben Thompson because I've found like understanding big tech. Kind of everything is downstream of big tech if you work on the internet in any way at all in media. So that's a great newsletter. One that I study a lot is Dickey and Cole from Ship 30 for 30 Premium Ghostwriting Academy. They're just really good at email marketing. And, this is kind of separate than newsletters, but if you want to get better at sending emails that sell, you got to subscribe to a lot of good email marketers. I kind of have one dedicated email for that, and I save their emails, I categorize them, and then I use that as inspiration for the marketing emails that I send. So that's another one. I like Morning Brew. When I was working in the Hustle before we were acquired, the content was way better, and I was actually reading that for years before I worked there. Um, Probably some of the best newsletter content I've seen was the Milk Road, but again, like that company, I worked there early. We got acquired. It kind of changed after the acquisition, so I don't read that anymore, and I'm not super crypto focused anymore. But those are good examples to look at if people want to see like what a good newsletter is. You can't really go along looking at Morning Brew, The Hustle, and those types of folks.
Okay. And again, as a consumer, I'd be interested to hear how you end up on these lists. Like, where are you discovering the newsletters that you follow?
That's the thing about newsletters. It's kind of like podcasts. Like, oh, I forget how I originally discovered it because I've been consuming it so long on a weekly or daily basis. Like, how did I originally get there? So for the hustle, like, I think I remember like, oh, I just like heard about this through word of mouth. But then when I worked there and I looked at my email address and the sign up source, I actually signed up through a Facebook ad. So a lot of it's that. And then a lot of it, just in my experience, is like social media. I'm following someone on LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube, which is not social media, but it's close. And I want to get more of their content. I want to like get all the insights they have. So I join their newsletter, their email list, or a lot of times it's a lead magnet. Like everybody's signed up for a lead magnet. They're giving away something cool. You enter in your email to get it. That that simple strategy gets overlooked a lot, but it is probably one of the most powerful ways to grow.
And I know there are some absolutely huge players in the space. Could you just talk to, some of those type of businesses, what niches they operate in, and just roughly in terms of scale, how big the newsletter business can get?
Yeah, it's definitely a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think people just don't realize how big the players are because they're not like the Vice Medias or BuzzFeeds or Mr. Beast of the world. They're not like quite that big or that public. There's a couple like as far as acquisitions, Morning Brew was acquired for 75 million. The Hustle was acquired for 30 million plus. Milk Road, it was one that I worked with closely from the early days. We got acquired for seven figures after 10 months. Industry Dive is probably the biggest newsletter centric acquisition where they were acquired for 525 million, so over $500 million. And I wouldn't describe any of these companies as like just newsletter companies, but email and newsletter is the primary way they reach their audience, right? So there's more acquisitions too. Some companies that are crushing it right now. One is called 1440 Media. They're more of like a general daily news publication. Over 4.5 million email subscribers, over 25 million annual revenue. They do over a million in revenue per employee, so they have a super lean team. The Pour Over is another one with a million plus subscribers, seven figures in revenue. And there's a bigger long tail of people that are like at 6 and 7 figures who are just, they don't really share revenue numbers. They're not going to get acquired. They're not planning to sell their business, and so it's it's less transparent than some like public SaaS companies, for example, that are always raising another fundraising round. You get to see what they look like in a little bit more detail.
And would you class companies like Agora as newsletter companies, or would you say they're kind of more general media?
Yeah, that's one I forgot, and that's a really good point. So like Agora, the parent company that has a bunch of different newsletter and financial publications beneath it, they've had years where they've done over a billion or $1.5 billion in sales. So I would put them in the newsletter category. And honestly, like, I know it's easier for people to categorize things like this is a newsletter company, this is a YouTuber, etc. But I really try and categorize businesses based off of who they serve, not how they reach them. Because channels may change, and newsletter has definitely been the most consistent channel. But like, I believe in being customer centric. So a lot of times Agora is categorized as a financial publisher, or sometimes they call them FinPubs for short. So that's like the industry lingo in the FinPub space. But there's also businesses that are almost as big as Agora. There's a business called MarketWise, which is a publicly traded company, and they have the same model. It's very newsletter first, and they've done over 500 million in revenue. A lot of that recurring revenue. So there's some massive, multi-billion-dollar companies. There's not hundreds of multi-billion-dollar newsletters. There's more of a handful. Um, but what I love about the space is it's more about like bootstrappers. It's accessible. There's so many more people building really cool businesses that are doing 6 or 7 figures in annual profits for themselves with small teams that I really love working with. And not everything has to be a multi-billion-dollar business, but it's possible, right?
You mentioned there kind of companies being media companies. Do you think every business in the media space should have a newsletter component?
Yes, I think there's really only three channels that matter in media right now. So media just means like your business revolves around content in some way. That could be you publish content on a website and you sell ads, or you publish content to a newsletter or social media and you sell like a course, or even like an event I would categorize under media, or a coaching program, anything where it's like one to many and it's more information and content based. So I think the three channels that really matter, that are going to determine the future, are newsletter, podcast, and YouTube. And I think newsletters, one that pretty much everybody should have. The only exception, which won't apply to most people, is just more the more entertainment based media companies and creators. So like if you're Mr. Beast, he doesn't really need a newsletter. Like that medium doesn't really make sense for the type of content he's producing. But everybody who's more information, educational based content should be using email in some way.
Is that based on the type of content, or is that based more on the kind of demographic that you serve?
It's both. Yeah, people don't really start using email until they're in college, out of college, and then if you have a professional career, you have to use email. So Mr. Beast does have a younger audience, but I mean, he has a lot of older people too, because it's hundreds of millions of people, right? But so it's both. But it's just like I know people who have talked to Mr. Beast about launching a newsletter, and I think they never got past like what should you actually have as content in the newsletter? Like, what's the editorial content? Is it just a notification for your video? Then like how necessary is it, when you're dominating the YouTube platform? There's a huge value in owning your audience, but when you kind of own YouTube like someone like he does, it's maybe less relevant for him. And when there's just no clear problem that the newsletter solves, that's difficult. Like Mr. Beast helps you escape. He entertains you. Like he solves a clear problem, has a clear value proposition in video format, but like what's his value proposition in written format? I don't know if that exists for him, and that's okay.
In terms of what you've seen in kind of the newsletter space, are there certain threads or common threads that you could pull on which make, a company have a really good newsletter versus, a not so great one?
Yeah, and I would say like foundationally, think about how you're going to use email to grow, engage, and monetize your audience. And then there's kind of two sides to that. So one is newsletter, which I consider like value-based editorial email. So like 80-90% of the newsletter is content that's going to help somebody, inform them, and then 10% is call to actions. And then marketing emails, which everybody gets and sees, is 80-90% sales and call to actions, and maybe 10% value, right? And I do think you need to have both to win, because newsletters build the trust and engagement in the inbox. Like you keep they keep you in the primary folder. They kind of persuade people before they buy, and then marketing emails are where you're actually getting the transaction to happen. And so you do need to have both. And like a solid foundation is like a good weekly newsletter, and then marketing emails as needed around that. But it kind of goes back to what we talked about before, is like one of the core things is like the newsletter has to solve a problem, has to have a value proposition, and you have to think about it like a product in and of itself. That's what all the best newsletters do. And if you look at 1440 and my newsletter and many others, like we actually treat it like a product, not just a throwaway email. A lot of people are like, I'm going to start a newsletter on like, 5 things I love this week, I found this week. And they just write about a variety of things. And they don't really like know who it serves, how it's going to help them, what's the cadence and content going to be. But if you were creating a digital course or a book or any product, you would think about all those things. And you would think about product development and product market fit and your ideal customer avatar, and then the features and benefits that solve problems for them. And so just approach it that way. If you approach it like a product and you build it with that framework, you're going to be fine. People who just think like it's just another throwaway piece of content like a blog post or a tweet are going to really struggle with newsletters.
Okay, interesting. And in terms of someone that is, getting started in the space, maybe they're looking at kind of different niches or different topics they want to talk about. Do you have any advice for that in terms of variables to look at when selecting a niche to start with?
Yeah, I think newsletters are a content business. They're kind of a subset of media, and it's hard to kind of theorize about what your niche is without actively being in that niche and kind of participating in that niche first. So for some people I talk to, it's super obvious, where it's like, hey, I've worked in private equity for 20 years and like I'm going to write a newsletter for the type of people that I worked with, right? Or I worked in agriculture. Like there's endless things like that where you have personal passion and experience where you obviously know what your niche is, and that's great. But a lot of people just have a variety of passions or interests, or they're just younger and they don't have as much experience. And so what I would do is just start publishing content on somewhere where you can get more immediate feedback, which is going to be social media. So LinkedIn, Twitter, even Substack Notes, which is kind of like a Twitter competitor. And like, create things that you're interested in talking about that you think help people. And through publishing consistently every week for a couple months, you're going to start to get followers and feedback and have conversations in the comments and the DMs. And you're going to nail down more like what people really like, that you'll build your niche around. So that's one thing that people don't do, is they try and like think of everything in their head. But what really matters is audience feedback. And that is the hard part. People are really afraid to publish, but that's what you have to get over, because like the only way you get better at content is by publishing. You don't get better by writing. Writing is kind of like masturbation to some degree. Like you have to get eyeballs on your words out in the world. And then another framework I think about is how do you monetize it? I try and think about the end in mind, because assuming you're trying to build a business around it, most people are, what's the end point where you're actually going to monetize them? And there's really two different broad categories. There's like selling sponsorships in the newsletter, and then there's selling products to the newsletter audience that you have. And a lot of people do both. But I would think about, can you eventually create and sell a product to this audience? Like, do they buy things? What type of things do they buy? And I prefer to work around niches that actually buy what I call media products. So things like digital products, courses, coaching programs, events, books, stuff like that. Because most like newsletter writers, they're not going to make a software or like a widget or some physical thing. They're going to create a media product. So like, does your audience actually buy media products? What do they buy? And then second is, how valuable are they to advertisers? Do advertisers actually want to get in front of them? And generally, the more niche business focused audiences that have a lot of decision makers or really high earners do well in the advertising space. So like advertisers, the biggest advertisers in the newsletter world are like more B2B companies, like a HubSpot who's selling software. And if you buy their CRM, they'll make $50,000 from the lifetime of your software subscription. Or maybe it's an investment service company or financial services, or fintech, and they want to get in front of like high net worth investors who have portfolios that are 6 figures, 7 figures. And so that's the important part. Like, does your audience make a lot of money? Are they worth a lot of money? Or do they make decisions at a business where they control a big budget? Like, there's people who have relatively entry level jobs, but they control a budget of $1 million a quarter at their company. And
Hmm.
so you either have to have, I mean, if you really want to maximize for revenue, you want to have one of those two things or both.
Okay. So, am I correct in hearing that you're saying the best niches from kind of a monetization aspect are, FinPub, B2B, or someone that's serving, high net worths?
There's so many exceptions. I think that's generally true. But yeah, I love FinPub, so you're serving investors and traders. I love B2B, where you're serving basically industry, professionals, leaders, people who are like a director level, a VP level and above. You're writing for that industry, for that type of employee or type of business leader. Another one I love is entrepreneurship. Like you're writing for business owners and founders. They're willing to pay to improve their success. This is kind of the niche that I operate in, is like entrepreneurs, founders, creators. And but I mean, I've seen so many people like 1440, for example. It's just general news, and they've built a really broad audience that's really big, and they've done fine with that. I've seen people succeed in calligraphy, where they help people write pretty looking words. So I wouldn't discourage someone from doing a non-business related niche, as long as you have some true passion and skill in it. Like there are products to sell, there are ways to monetize. Sometimes it's a little bit less obvious. You need to be more creative, but it definitely can be done.
What about obscure niches? And the reason I kind of asked this is I'm sure I read a story once of a guy that was doing eight figures with a kind of agricultural news business. And he was just,
Yeah,
talking about commodities and stuff for farmers. Have you seen stuff like this a lot?
I'm forgetting his name. Maybe you can like have it in the show notes or something. But yeah, he's a great one to look at. And frankly, he does write for more like his audience is like 50% farmers and 50% agriculture traders and investors. So people who are like trading corn futures and soybean futures and stuff. And then the farmers need to know that, because this isn't just like your mom and pop farm. This is people who are operating on hundreds or thousands of acres, who have multi-million dollar farming businesses. And he has like a daily subscription newsletter about the agriculture industry. So like it sounds obscure to most people and me, but agriculture is actually one of the biggest industries in the world. Like it's up there like oil, then agriculture, as far as like the multi-trillion dollar industries. Um, but that also shows there's a lot of opportunity in this space. Like I've talked to some people who just they're in Houston, Texas, and they write about the oil industry or the natural gas industry, and there's not a lot of media companies that serve those huge markets, and they crush it with super small audiences. So there's a lot of like niche obscure B2B stuff that works. There's a lot of obscure non B2B stuff that works. One category I like is like the hyper passionate high earners. So people who are into things like scuba diving, maybe like they're deeply passionate fan bases like Warhammer, and they buy a lot of like figurines and in board games and stuff. There's a ton more out there. I'm kind of forgetting some of my favorite examples right now. Like a reef keeping is another one. Like people spend tens of thousands of dollars on their home aquariums, basically. Like the list goes on, and that stuff is awesome too. But you probably do need to have some passion for it as well. Like if you're writing the reef keeping newsletter and you've have no experience, I think it's possible actually, because there's very little competition. Like AI can help you a lot, but it's going to be better if you care about the hobby as well.
Outside of kind of B2B and B2C, have you worked much with kind of non-profits or charities? And is there a space for that in the newsletter world?
Yeah, we have. It's the minority of our clients. But we've had some great nonprofit clients in various spaces, like the religious space, different advocate groups or different causes. A big part of the way that nonprofits fundraise is through media, right? And so, like, and most of them, frankly, don't do. It's just hard to run a nonprofit because, like, hiring people and like attracting the best talent is tough. But newsletters are just such a way to like build a deep relationship with your audience, your donors or potential donors. Like keep them updated every week about what you're doing, and then ask for donations, ask for funds. And I think I would say most nonprofits do have a newsletter, or they've definitely considered one. I think it's definitely a must. They probably need to do a lot better job with their newsletter, because just like any piece of content, most of it's kind of garbage. But it's a really powerful tool for that industry.
And I guess in a similar vein, in the US, like, do the political parties leverage newsletter marketing a lot, or no?
Yeah, I haven't operated in that space. As far as like, we have worked with people who are media companies that cover news and politics, but not with any political candidates or anything. But yeah, it's huge, and I'm not up to date on it. But like the Trump campaign, they're notorious for like heavy email marketing, maybe less newsletters and more like hammering people with a lot of emails to get donations. I'm sure Kamala's campaign did it too, and it's done on other local campaigns outside of like the presidential election. It's huge. I just know a little bit less about it than the more businessy
Okay.
for-profit stuff.
And in terms of legacy companies, legacy media companies, do you look at any of those guys and think they are, doing well with kind of this pivot or the newsletter space in general?
No, I don't. I can't think of one like legacy media company that's doing well with newsletters or really anything in general, except for the biggest players. Like, New York Times, they have a great business. They also have like an institution that's really hard to mess up. Wall Street Journal has the same type of thing, but New York Times actually is pretty newsletter savvy. They have like the Morning is one of the biggest newsletters in the world, and it's very email first, where you can like read the entire thing in your inbox and get a lot of great information and value. One thing that the legacy media companies do wrong is they use the newsletter as like a marketing email for their blog. And so you've probably seen newsletters like this where it's like the entire email is just like 10, 20 different stories, and it's like the headline and it says read more. Well, it's like this is of no value to me in the inbox. And that's one of the key things that newsletters should be is I should be able to read it in the email and walk away with something useful. If I can't do that, it's a marketing email or it's just something that's going to perform very poorly and get a low open rate and very high unsubscribe rate over time. And that's what most legacy media companies do. They'll send like 20 different newsletters, but it's all just links to blog posts. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't ever have a link to your newsletter. Yeah, of course you should link to your blog and link to other things that are relevant, but like there needs to be something in the email that's useful by itself. And that's why companies like Morning Brew have been so successful because the idea is like, hey, you read it in 5 minutes and you're informed on what you need to know for the rest of the day in the world of like business and tech. And people just haven't caught on to that. And they're using like the same newsletter template they did 10 years ago. And so their email engagement sucks and they don't make much money from email because of that. But one thing I'll say with like the legacy media folks, most of them have just had to pivot so many times and no top talent wants to work for 100-year-old newspaper. It's just really tough to make it work. Like they had to pivot from print to web. They have to pivot from web to mobile. They have to pivot to social. They had to pivot away from Facebook when Facebook stopped sending traffic to everybody. They pivot to search, and then now search doesn't work anymore because of all the AI answers. And so like they've just been like hit over the head a zillion times in the past 20 years. And that's why like we almost exclusively operate in what I call like the new media and creator economy, where it's newer media companies and then creators who are building media companies on top of a personal brand. And I've just found a lot more passion for that space.
Taking it back to what you were saying before about getting started. So you said, it's key to get that kind of initial feedback loop. Maybe try posting on social media. What else do you say to someone that's looking to get started with a newsletter? What should they be doing?
Yeah, I think that's essential because what people don't realize, what I didn't realize when I started, is that newsletters are what I call a discovery platform. Um, so like actually I missed that. Newsletters are what I call a relationship platform. Excuse me. Relationship platform is you build a deep relationship, you can monetize them, you have a one-to-one connection, but like there is no built-in algorithmic discovery. There's no built-in sharing. So like if I post to Twitter or TikTok, the algorithm can show my content to more people outside of just my followers, and then other accounts can like share that with their audience and it can reach them. You don't have that with email. So email newsletters don't grow organically. They're for relationships and monetization. So you have to have what I call a discovery channel and a relationship channel. So like your discovery channel is social media, YouTube. That's about it. Relationship is pretty much email and podcast. And you kind of have to have a two-channel business, and so you really got to go all in on one discovery channel, like pick one that's best for you. For a long time I was really focused on Twitter. Now I'm really focused on LinkedIn and YouTube. And then throughout that time I've always been focused on how do I take my followers on those places, my subscribers on those discovery platforms that I don't really own, and then move them over to email. And so for example, like I built a big Twitter following, and then Twitter, like the algorithm completely changed. I can barely get reach there. So many people like me have struggled, but I was able to get, half of my followers to join my email list. And I now still have those people years later. And I still have a relationship with them and I'm still making money from them because I was able to do that. So that's one thing. Should I elaborate more? You want to go over the question again? I might have forgot the first part of it, honestly.
No, I think that was a good answer. It's just, yeah, in terms of those initial first steps, you've talked there about, yeah, kind of building that social following. Is there anything else that you'd recommend to kind of beginners to get traction?
Yeah, some more tactical stuff would be like you need a schedule and a cadence for content. And if you don't want to create content, this just isn't really for you. Like AI can help, and you should use AI for like research and editing and as much as you can. But like if you're just kind of reposting what AI does, people see right past that, and they're looking for high signal content. So I think you need a cadence. A cadence I really like for beginners is like, can I do 3 social posts a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and can I do 1 newsletter a week? Could be whatever day for your newsletter. Saturday is often good for people because they're going to have all week to complete it. And if you can stick with that for 90 days, you're going to see results. What people do is okay, I'm going to do a daily newsletter. This is the mistake I made when I first started. I'm going to do a daily newsletter, and I'm like burnt out in 2 weeks. And like I have 100 subscribers because I didn't do any posting on social media to actually have people discover me, or people they want to post 7 times a day on a week on social media, and they burn out for 2 weeks and they don't post for 2 weeks and they go back again. You're much better with like a lower cadence for a longer time period to start with. And then
Okay.
what I would add is the more intangible thing is like, you know, use this stuff to build relationships with other people who also have audiences who are also in your niche or industry. So like we have a relationship because like I've looked at your podcast, you've read my content, and like I'm able to come on your podcast, and that's going to help me grow my audience. And so like responding to your comments, commenting on other accounts that are bigger than you, over time, those connections really matter. And when you're 6, 12 months in, 2 years in, like that really starts to amplify your growth. And this is much more of a snowball business than it is like a linear business. If anybody's ever built like a service business before or a local business, like you kind of get one client, then two, then three, and it's always going to grow linearly no matter what. Media, it can grow exponentially as your growth compounds, as your following and your connections compound over time.
And in terms of that growth, then, what would you say? Obviously at the start we're saying organic social is the best way to get kind of new traffic to the list. Over time, how does that change? And maybe if we talk about, getting your first 100 subscribers versus 10,000 versus 100,000, what are the different approaches there?
Yeah, that's the fun thing I can walk through. So 100 subscribers, I actually don't think it needs to be social. I think you can, and I really encourage people to go out and like make a contact list of like all the friends, family, colleagues, everybody in their email address book, and just announce you're doing a newsletter. And this is really scary because you're like, this is a brand new thing. I don't know if I'm going to stick with it. You announce that to 100 people who are kind of in your network, because you'll get a lot of them to subscribe. A lot of times people get and I teach this to people, they get 50, 100 subscribers in 24 hours, and now you have someone to write to, and now you have some accountability for yourself. It's like, oh shit, all these people subscribed. 100 subscribers is going to feel like a lot if you just started the newsletter. I actually have to follow through. And so that's actually step number one. Then step number two would be the social. Announce on social you're starting a newsletter. Anytime you're starting something new, you have like this ability to ask for something that you don't really get when you're a couple months into something. So like announce it, ask your friends to share it, ask people to subscribe, because it's a new thing and people want to support people who are starting brand new things from scratch. So I encourage that. And then you start doing your regular weekly posting 3 times a week, etc. You have call to actions for your newsletter, stuff like that. That's how you get from 0 to 1,000 subscribers. And you can go well beyond that too. Like we have clients who have added over 100,000 subscribers organically through one social platform like Twitter, Instagram, etc. Like there's a long way you can go for organic social. And I would go as far as you can, right? Like there's I think what people don't realize is there's more scale than you think. Like there's billions of users on these platforms, billions of users on YouTube, on Instagram, etc. You're building a content business, and so a lot of people are like, "Oh, I've been posting on 3 times a week on Instagram for 6 months, and like I'm capped at 10,000 subscribers." Well, you can do 7 times a week. You can produce better content. You can try different tactics like giveaways, where you ask people to comment a word, and then you email them a lead magnet where they have to enter their email address to get access to that, so you grow your list. Like there's just a lot more juice you can squeeze out of social and YouTube than people realize, and that can go on forever. So like that, it goes from 100 to infinite potentially. Then the really other category is if we'll put aside partnerships, like going on other podcasts, guest posting on other blogs, and being a guest writer in other newsletters. That's awesome, but that's like not really a scalable channel. I encourage that, but you can't do that every single week. The other category is paid ads, and that's usually how people go from anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000, or 100,000 to a million plus. Like I've I have seen very few newsletters that have a million plus subscribers that haven't used paid ads. There's very few exceptions to that. And the only caveat to that is like you have to have a proven newsletter. So like a lot of people do paid ads day one, and then they start doing their newsletter and they're getting like 20% open rate because the newsletter content hasn't been proven with an organic audience first. So that's step number one. Step number two is that you have to have some way to recoup that investment. You have to be monetizing in some way. And that's why it's, ideally you want to get to 5 to 10,000 subscribers organically before you do paid ads so that you can, monetize that audience, sell products, sell sponsorships, have some idea of like what your lifetime value of a newsletter subscriber is. So, hey, I'm making $5 per subscriber on average. I can go and afford to pay Facebook $2 per subscriber. It is helpful to use paid ads when you want to go from 10K to 100K or more, but people should be more focused on the ROI they get from the ads and not just the list size they get from the ads, because the list size really doesn't matter as much as a lot of people think.
That I think is a good basis. But are there any other growth channels that you recommend? Maybe co-reg referral schemes or other ways people can grow their list.
I think there's about 30 different like channels that you can use to grow, and then there's like multiple strategies or tactics on how you can apply those channels. After doing this for a long time, I've become more of a square, and I think most people should actually do a lot less and focus more. And so I really think you need to have like that one discovery channel. And I think the best ones are YouTube, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Like out of all the options out there, they're better than TikTok, better than Twitter. For most people, there's exceptions, right? Then there's paid ads, and I think the only paid ad channel worth using as the first source is Meta ads, so Facebook and Instagram ads. It just has the combination of like the highest quality subscriber, the best ROAS, and also the lowest cost. It's also infinitely scalable. Like we work with clients who spend $500,000 a month on ads to grow their email list and to get customers, and like it's still working at that level and it's still profitable. You can go a long way. Like you don't need, 1440, they have 4.5 million subscribers. 70-80% of that growth has come from meta ads. Like you don't need a dozen different ways to grow the newsletter. So those are like kind of three different channels, because you're not going to do YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn really well all at once. If you're a beginner, you kind of have to focus on one. Same thing with paid ads, you just focus on meta ads. And then a third one will be the partnership channel, which is, again, you can't do a new partnership every week, right? But I think it's really powerful because the subscribers you get are such high intent. They've already been warmed up by the person kind of recommending you. So I love doing cross promotions, which is basically where someone runs a little ad about your newsletter in their newsletter and vice versa. So you're promoting each other. Guest posting on other newsletters, guest posting on other blogs, and then being a podcast guest or going back and forth is super powerful. Those are some of the beginners are kind of like rolling their eyes because like, oh, I don't have any relationships, I don't have any credibility to do that. You'll get there by posting more on social media and by posting your newsletter for a long time. You can get there, but those are really the three categories that I would pursue, and I would try and put aside most everything else. I think a lot of people if you've been in the newsletter space, you've heard of things like CoReg or paid recommendations or SparkLoop or Beehive Boost or Substack recommendations. Those are a lot of sources that are very low quality, low intent, and don't lead to buyers. They actually can hurt you more than they can help you, because you'll get a lot of spam requests from those spam complaints from those sources. Yesterday, I ran an analysis of our list where it's like, okay, from which signup source and which present what amount of subscribers converted to buyers. So like Facebook ads versus LinkedIn versus YouTube versus Google search versus paid recommendations, etc. And so we found like organic sources like search, YouTube, LinkedIn, etc. We converted, and if we compare those to the low quality sources like recommendations and CoReg, the organic sources converted to customers at an over 6,000% higher rate than the CoReg and recommendation sources. And so they're just so much more valuable, even though we did get tens of thousands of subscribers from recommendations. Like we got like 3 buyers from that. And a lot of beginners just don't have all that context and have the data, so they waste a lot of time on sources that actually hurt them more than they help them.
How do you run that analysis out of interest?
It's not perfect, because a lot of times you're gonna like have a newsletter platform like Beehive or Substack or something, and then you'll have a checkout platform like Stripe or we use a Circle for like paid memberships and courses and a client community. So that it's hard to integrate the two. What we do is just like we export all of our email newsletter subscribers in the source where they signed up. So it's like email address signed up from Meta ads, signed up from LinkedIn, etc. and then we export all of our customer emails. And then I put it in the chat GPT and I ask something like, hey, can you match all these emails and tell me the sign up source by email and how many signed up from each source? And so it's like meta ads, 300 customers, direct traffic, 1,000 customers, etc. And then you can go and ask more questions. You can get like the percentage breakdown and the differences between the different channels. So that's how I do it.
Is there a way to vet or filter the kind of quality of subscriber on the front end when they sign up, and then maybe kind of carve out the ones that are below a certain grade?
Yeah, I think open rate and click through rate are like the early predictors of success, but they're not the end all be all. And I actually everybody says open rate and click through rate in that order because it's the way it's presented to you in a dashboard inside these email service providers. But really, it's click through rate and open rate because click through rate's way more important. It's way more reliable than open rate. Open rate's been kind of compromised by Apple, who has all these fake opens in their email service providers. Um, so click through rate and open rate, like if you're getting signups from a source, then you're getting 5 to 10% click through rate. That's a really good sign. If you're getting a 50% plus open rate, that's a good sign as well. Um, and I would try and sell something early on. Um, you know, People are most excited to buy something from you after they've been on your list for like 7 to 30 days. Like they got to know you a little bit over 7 days. Um, they're kind of in that prime period where like they have high intent. They signed up for you because they have a problem and they want help solving that problem. After they've been on your list for 6 months, they may not have that problem anymore. They may not even care about the topic anymore. So you do want to sell something in the first 60 days for sure. And I would make that attempt. Also, if you have like a business, some people sell high ticket stuff, and it's like, okay, I'm not going to get someone to buy my $10,000 product in one click, but do they book a sales call? Do they book a meeting with me? Do they watch a webinar? That type of stuff matters too.
You mentioned there kind of pushing people to buy in that 7 to 30 day window. What do you recommend doing once someone has signed up? Is that putting people through a welcome flow? Are you capturing more data on people? What does the journey look like for the customer, or for the kind of new person on the list to becoming a customer?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I do. We call it the sign up flow. This type of stuff has worked for me and clients as well. So this kind of becomes a long process. But so after someone signs up, they sign up for the newsletter, sign up for a lead magnet. We send them immediately to what we call a post sign up survey. Most people don't do this at all. So this is a really cool tactic. And what it is, it's 5 to 7 multiple choice questions that just help us learn more about who they are. So like, what's your job title? For me, it's like, how many newsletter subscribers do you have? What software do you use? Stuff like that. It's going to be different for everybody, but that one that helps us just understand who our audience is. So like, what revenue level are they at? Like, what do they care about? What do they want to learn about? That's helpful for us. It's also helpful when we sell sponsorships. We can give a much better picture of who our audience is, which is all the advertiser cares about, is like who the audience is and how much leads and sales I'm going to get from them. And then what's really cool is like we can use that data to send custom emails. So if they say I have less than 1,000 newsletter subscribers, 24 hours later I can send an email that says, "Hey, I saw you're just starting your newsletter. Like here's my best guide on that, or here's my product for that." Or if they say like I don't use an email service provider, which is what we use to send emails, tools like Beehive, ConvertKit, etc. I can say 24 hours later or longer, "Hey, I saw you're trying to decide what email service provider to use. I recommend this one. Here's why." And then I have like an affiliate link, and I get a lot of commissions from those types of sales. So that's like step number 2. Step number 3 is some type of thank you page or confirmation page where we briefly welcome them to the newsletter, tell them what to expect. You kind of what I like to say is the landing page where they sign up, that sells them on actually signing up, but your thank you page sells them on actually like opening and reading your newsletter, because you have to do both. And what I think is important in that place is I want to direct someone to my welcome. I want to give them some type of incentive to open the welcome email, because I think if I get higher welcome email open rates and I have other things I recommend people do in that welcome email, which I'll explain in a second, all of my future emails are going to get better engagement. Like if I have a great first impression, I'm going to get great email engagement. If I have great email engagement, I'm going to sell more. So that's a key thing. Another thing that I often do is if I have a webinar I'm promoting, I have a VSL, like a next step, I direct them there. If I don't have that, that's okay. And then finally, in the welcome email, I try and get people to click the email, move that email to their primary inbox, and reply to it. If I can get them to do those 3 actions, I'm going to stay in the primary folder or move to primary. If I don't get any of that, I'm going to stay in promotions or eventually go to promotions. And that's actually a big part of the battle of email. Is it's not just about getting in the inbox, it's about getting in the primary folder. So that's really important to do that.
Okay, and you mentioned there kind of the welcome flow. Is that just one email, or is there a whole kind of series behind that?
Yeah, so to elaborate, so there's one welcome email that they get immediately, and then after that, there's a welcome series, which is usually between 5 to 10 emails that are sent over the next 30 days. So 24 hours later, 48 hours later, etc. Usually I space those out by like 1 day initially, and then I move to 2 days spacing, then I move to 3 days spacing, and I try and get those all sent in 30 days. And so that's more kind of like telling the story and taking them on the journey of being a subscriber. So like, who I am, why you should trust me. Here's my best content that you should check out. Um, I forget everything because like these are things where you kind of write them once and then you forget about them. That's why they're so powerful because they're automated. But you're basically taking them from someone who doesn't know you at all and needs the foundational stuff to your more and more advanced stuff. And then typically you're toggling between the initial emails in the welcome series are more about getting value and hopefully increasing your email engagement, getting them to keep you in primary. And then as you add value, as you actually help them, then you can go more towards sales and call to actions as you get towards the later emails in that series.
Okay, interesting. And just circling back to what you said before about the offer to get people on the list. I think you mentioned lead magnets. Are there any kind of tips and tricks that you'd tell people of what they should be offering people as an incentive to kind of sign up?
Yeah, I think it's a must. I mean, it's like lead magnet. It's been a strategy for decades, and it will keep working for decades. It's just like an incentive to get contact information, and I think everybody has to use it, but it doesn't have to be as hard or time consuming as people imagine. So a lot of people they like, oh, I'm going to make a lead magnet about this topic, and I'm going to write a 50-page ebook or like make a free course, and they just spend like hours and hours on these lead magnets, and then like they test it, and it doesn't really work well because people didn't care about the topic. And so what I prefer is like short and sweet, actionable lead magnets that solve a narrow problem. You don't try and give them the complete solution for growing their newsletter, for example. You give them, hey, here are the 3 best sources to grow your newsletter. And that's like a 1 page thing. And so lead magnets should be like a less than a 15-minute time to either watch or read or consume. Like it should be super quick and actionable. And because of that, you can create them more quickly. So what I do is I kind of think about every newsletter that I write every single week could be a lead magnet, and I write it with that in mind. And so I actually don't create any dedicated lead magnets. It's just like newsletters that I write because I try and be short and actionable in my newsletter, and then I publish them to my website in a format that we call email gated. So if someone clicks on that link, they have to enter their email address to read the the post or the lead magnet, and then I just use that link as my lead magnet landing page. And so when I do, and I can talk about different ways to promote lead magnets. When I do that, I send people to that page, and it didn't require any extra work from me. It's just another newsletter that they haven't seen before because they're not on the list. I'm using it in that context.
Okay, and have you ever tried charging for these lead magnets or charging to kind of give access to the list?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes. It comes transforms that into the category of like a tripwire or a digital product. I have not. I haven't done a lot of low ticket stuff. So meaning information products that are less than $100. I personally haven't done that. I think it's a great thing that can work for a lot of people. And what that does is that's not really going to grow your list, right? Because you have so much friction. Even if you have a super high conversion rate, maybe 5% of people who see that page are going to buy a low ticket lead magnet type product. But that does help you build your customer base. And so if you have something to sell them afterwards, maybe a high ticket thing to upsell them to, that's super powerful. And we talked a lot about newsletter list growth because of the deep relationship you have with that audience and how you can own your audience. But something that's really underrated is like getting a lot of buyers because people who buy stuff from you are going to be even more engaged with your content and they're going to be way more likely to buy again. And so it's a really powerful strategy too.
I think you raised like a conversion rate percentage there, just in terms of the paid side. What would you expect for kind of organic and paid traffic going to a landing page for a kind of free lead magnet or to sign up to a list? What are like benchmark stats for those kind of sign up rates?
Yeah, free signups is going to be way higher. So lead our benchmark for like any type of landing page for a lead magnet or just a newsletter is going to be 50% higher. So half of people who land on that page sign up for the newsletter. And it's very normal for people to have like 20%, 40% or whatever, but with some tweaks and improvements that can get to 50%. There's some exceptions. What I'm talking about here is where you're just asking for an email address. Hey, I have this cool free book ensure your email to get it. Like that's bad copy, but you get the idea. Every single additional thing you ask for is going to reduce that conversion rate. So you ask for a name, you're going from 50% to 45 or 40%. You ask for a phone number, you're going down to 30% or 20%. So keep that in mind. That's why I also ask for those things after someone gives me their email. So that's what the post sign up survey. They give me their email, and then I ask them multiple choice questions. And one of those is, what's your phone number? And I get phone numbers from 20% of people who give me their email.
Talking of ads, when you're kind of pushing a lead magnet, are you advertising that in the ad, or are you kind of just pushing people to a landing page and then doing the kind of selling, about a lead magnet or to sign up to the list on the page?
Yeah. So if we're using ads to grow our list, it's either we're advertising a lead magnet or we're advertising the benefits and how the newsletter solves a problem, benefits of the newsletter, right? Occasionally it's both. And oftentimes those are my favorite types of ads. So it's like, hey, I have this free newsletter that 50,000 founders and creators read. And every week I teach you XYZ. When you join for free today, you also get my free guide on how to do blank. So that's the lead magnet part. So it's like an additional little bonus to get them over the edge to click and sign up. So I love ads like that. I also love ads that are just about the newsletter benefits. That's what my team does mostly for myself and our clients. The one thing I don't love is just ads about the lead magnet that don't mention the newsletter at all. And the reason for that is it's just the intent in which they sign up. They're signing up to get this thing that you're giving them. And oftentimes they sign up, they get the thing, and they leave and they don't open any emails or they unsubscribe. When they're signing up to get your newsletter and receive emails from you, they're way more likely to open the emails from you and they get the thing as a little bonus. And so that's been a major change that I think very few people do that we do, where we're able to see like the same source, like meta ads, we get double the engagement just by having that simple messaging change in the way that we approach the strategy.
And for ads, aside from what you just said there, what are the key levers to success?
Yeah, proof of concept is big. So there's like having a newsletter that's actually good. Like, hey, you've gotten to 5,000 subscribers organically. You have 50% open rate, 5% open rate. It sounds kind of not obvious, but every time like we work with someone who's like, oh, I know this is a good newsletter, they have this huge organic list or even small organic list, but it has great engagement, they just do better with ads because they just have a better product. It's like it's just easier to advertise a good product versus a bad product or an unproven product. Maybe that's obvious to some people, but like a lot of beginners, it's not obvious too. Other things that are important are, and I think that the reason I started with that is because like it's really all about the value proposition of the newsletter. Like we've really struggled. Some clients come to us and they're like, I have this like, it's basically like a morning brew copy or it's like a milk brew copy or it's like this generic content that's just not really new or unique. It doesn't really solve a problem. It's just kind of a bad product and it's just really hard to advertise versus clients that they have something cool and unique. Like we worked with James Clear and he has like the 321 newsletter that has this really cool style and tone, and he has all this credibility as a best-selling author. We worked with this guy called like Anti-Citizen, and it's about all these kind of like strategies to live globally and reduce taxes legally, and it's very libertarian minded, and like there's a great community that he's built up, and that just crushed it because it's so unique, and he kind of has the credibility to back it up because he lives like that himself. um, there's endless examples out there. Like Cody Sanchez is one of my first clients. She was talking like no one was talking about like boring businesses and how to acquire laundromats and home service businesses and how to like build wealth through that new medium. It was new, it was unique, and like her ads crushed it. We did a great job with like the ad creative and the landing page and all the technical setup, but like the angle was special too. And so that definitely matters. Like if it's like get smarter on business and tech in 5 minutes, if you run that ad, that's been done a million times, and you're going to really get poor results that way.
Okay, so it's kind of like novelty of topic is kind of the first principle to success.
Yeah, but still solving the problem though. Like if it's just novel, but it doesn't solve a problem or actually help people, it doesn't matter because people sign up for email newsletters to like stay informed and solve problems in their life and business. They don't sign up for email newsletters for fun. That's for Netflix and YouTube and all that stuff.
Okay, makes sense. In terms of the media buying itself, what should we be looking at in terms of the metrics like CPMs, click through rates, and so on? What does good look like?
I have some ballpark or benchmark, I should say. So you want to get CPM is like how much you pay Facebook to reach 1,000 people. Ideally, that's $25 or less, but you can make it work with higher. And the reality is, you have less control over that and more control over the other stuff. Then you have unique ad click through rate, which is what percent of people that actually see your ads click the ad and go to your website. We want that to be a minimum of 1% or higher, ideally 2 or 3%. Like we've had clients up to 5%. I think less than 1% is like average, but we want 1 to 2% or higher. And then we have landing page conversion rate, which is we talked about. Percent of people that visit your page actually subscribe. We want that to be 40 to 50% or higher. So usually, if you have a $25 CPM or less, you have a 1 or 2% click through rate or above, and you have a 40 or 50% or higher landing page conversion rate, you're going to get really good results on Meta. If you're below those benchmarks, that's also how I fix things. So, like if I'm below a 1% or 2% ad click through rate, that means my ad creative sucks. I need to make better ad creative that people actually click on and want to engage with. If my landing page conversion rate's low, that means my landing page is not good and I need to improve that. I need to make it more streamlined, improve the headline, stuff like that. If my CPM is super high, that's the one that's hard to fix. But maybe you're targeting an audience that's too narrow. Maybe you haven't tested enough ad creative. Um, Maybe you're getting a lot of negative comments on your ads and you can remove those and try and make ads that get less negative comments. That one's tough to fix, but generally, if you make good ad creative and you have a high click through rate and high conversion rate, Facebook will actually reward you of a good CPM.
If I'm considering, dumping some money in ad spend, let's say I've built my newsletter so far off organic content, how well do I need to know my numbers? Like, do I need to have my LTV mapped out and know, within 30 days of a sign up, I'm getting, X dollars back? Or is it more fluid than that?
If you are spending a relatively low amount than you can afford to lose, you don't need to be perfect. You can kind of like take your total revenue from your newsletter and your newsletter subscribers and like divide that to have like a very rough newsletter subscriber lifetime value. And so maybe that's okay. That's $4. That's $7, and you don't want to acquire subscribers. If your LTV is $4, you don't want to acquire subscribers for $4 because there's no margin there, right? You want to have a LTV to CAC ratio of 3 to 5x, ideally more, right? So if my LTV is $5, I can afford to pay two, for example. So that's fine to start with a low budget. So I'm spending 25, 50, $100 a day, and I'm not quite sure how the attribution looks, but I know directionally I'm going to be profitable. And because it's only $100 a day, I can afford that. I can afford to test that, and I can reinvest profits into this growth. So I think that's a great idea for a lot of people who have already kind of have something proven. Um, when you need to know your numbers more clearly is when you're spending thousands of dollars a day or more. And like we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars just for my newsletter myself in like a 30-day period. We spent way more for clients, and that's where you really have to stay on top of your stuff. And ideally, you want to have a system where when you acquire a subscriber, you make back the money that or more that you paid to acquire them within 30 days. That's kind of the gold standard because you can pay the credit card bill like when you get the cash in the bank account, something kind of like that. 60 days can work, 90 days can work too, but ideally it's 30 days. Um, and that's where really there's only two ways to do that in a broad sense. One is you just have a great newsletter advertising business, someone like a 1440 or a Morning Brew, and like I've sold out of ad inventory consistently for the past 6 months. I'm going to keep selling out. And I know if someone has like this open rate, this click through rate, this retention, I'm going to make $10 over the lifetime of their free newsletter subscription. So I can afford to pay two or three, and I can just do that all day. And that's why 1440 is getting 200,000 plus new subscribers per month from Meta because they know their LTV. They've sold ads for years. They can make it work. The other option is like I know that X% of subscribers or leads are going to buy a product within this timeline, and my product costs $1,000, $500, whatever it is, or more. And if I have that conversion rate, and I've had that conversion rate in the past with Facebook ads, I'm going to get a positive ROI, so I can keep spending more and maybe keep getting the same ROI or maybe a slightly less ROI, but I'm still making money because I have that positive ROI. So a lot of times those funnels aren't just newsletter funnels; they're like webinar funnels, which is what we do. So it's like you sign up for a webinar, or maybe you sign up for a newsletter, and then we immediately get you to register for the webinar afterwards. And then on that webinar, we're selling something, and we convert 5 or 10% of live attendees to a $1,000 purchase or bigger, and there's a clear ROI there. Um, could be something else, could be a VSL. There's all types of different funnels we could talk about, but you have to kind of have one of those two paths down if you're starting to spend the big bucks on Meta or other sources.
Is it ever a case where the funnel kind of breaks down as you scale? So let's say you kind of had your, CAC payback period sorted, you scaled up the ad spend, you've got lower quality traffic coming in, and now you're not, kind of profitable within 30 days. Does that happen much?
Yeah, all the time. It's just a constant back and forth battle with that type of stuff. So it's very normal, and it's very normal to like scale up and then okay, we're unprofitable for 30 days and we got to fix it. And we do fix it all the time, again and again. Like oftentimes, 4 times a year something like that will happen. And then there are thresholds where it gets harder. Like a lot of times people can be profitable like up to $10,000 per month in ad spend, but then once they kind of hit that threshold, roughly, they're breaking even or they're not making money, and so they have to improve their funnel or improve their ad creative to get the metrics in the right place where they are profitable. Another threshold is like 100K per month, and then it goes from there. So I mean, the challenging part of ads is generally, at least with Meta, as you spend more money, it's a bidding platform, so you
Yeah.
have to like bid higher to get in front of more people, and then it becomes harder and harder to make the funnel work. And usually your ROAS goes down, but even if your ROAS goes from 500% to 400, you're still making more money if you're spending more because you're just getting more customers. Like there's more volume there, so you don't have to have the same ROAS that you did when you were spending $100 a day. Um, it's just you're playing with way bigger numbers. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean that's kind of the name of the game. Is it's very normal, and it's just a battle you got to deal with.
Final question on kind of the ads piece and kind of growth. I don't know if this is possible to have an answer, but if you could kind of put into a pie chart acquisition by channel for your clients, what does that typically kind of look like? And maybe that's kind of, at the 7 or 6 or 7 figure level.
Yeah, like cost per newsletter subscriber acquisition, or how
Just
should
a
I
kind
describe
of
it?
source of subscribers, like number.
Oh yeah, give some ballparks because everybody is different, right? So when I worked at the Hustle, like I had like some clients I work with, like we have all their data, and some clients we work with in like a smaller capacity where we're like they're sharing data with us. When I worked at the Hustle, I think we had at the peak when I left, we had 2.5 million subscribers. About a million of them came from Facebook ads, and then it was really like maybe 20% were organic, another 30 or 40%, maybe another 20%, 25% was from like co-reg or affiliate type sources. And then there's a lot of miscellaneous stuff. There's like a lot of long tail of just like miscellaneous, referrals and website traffic you get. We probably had like 5% of the list was from the affiliate program. Everybody's different. I think 1440s, they're probably, more like 70% of subscribers, or at least new subscribers, are from a source like Meta ads. And then there's, maybe 10% from another ad source like ads in other newsletters or Live Intent or Google ads. And then there's probably a lot more organic that I'm not attributing. I don't really know everybody's numbers, right? And like, I don't, I don't have any data from 1440. I'm just kind of going off of like what they've talked about on podcast and stuff like that. Um, I mean, any follow up I should have on that? There's probably more I could share. I'm just not sure what would be most helpful to
I
people.
think that's what I was looking for. Is the rough ballpark that you shared there is good, and like you said as well, it's different for everyone, right? There's no one size fits all.
Yeah, and I think that might give people the wrong idea, honestly, because these are new. Like, we're talking about publishers of 2 million, 4 million subscribers. The Hustle got to 100,000 email subscribers completely organically. Like a Sawhill Bloom, who we've worked with, got to 100,000 plus totally organically, pretty much just through Twitter. Um, a lot of people can get to 10 to 50,000 organically too. So I love paid ads, and it's great. I just think people hear, oh, this company gets most of their subscribers from Facebook. I should only do Facebook too. But like, you're not at the same stage as them.
That's when they're at scale, so it's slightly different. I get that. In terms of kind of monetization, I know we've talked here about selling ad spots or kind of sponsorships. You mentioned digital products. I think events as well, high ticket service, obviously. Is there anything else we're kind of missing? And I guess the follow up question to that is, how should you think about the kind of different products to develop as part of a suite?
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances to it. I kind of think there's only one way to monetize your audience, but then there's different categories within that. So the only one way to monetize is just to sell products or services. And so that could be your product or service, which I call direct monetization, or it could be another company's product or service, which could be a sponsorship relationship, or sometimes even an affiliate relationship where you're getting paid on for performance rather than like a flat fee. And so that breaks us down to like sell your own offer, sell sponsorships and ads, or work in an affiliate capacity and get paid on performance. And like the reality is there's media businesses that have done $1 million in revenue or got to a billion, sorry, done $1 billion in revenue or got to $1 billion valuation just by using one of those three ways. So all of those work. It's more a matter of what's better for you and your audience. So a lot of the kind of people who are more like thought leaders and experts, like I don't like calling myself that, but I fit into that category. Direct monetization through selling media products and services is great. People who are building uh, bigger, more scaled audiences, like a 1440, broader audiences, usually sponsorships is great. And then publishers who are maybe have a really high intent audience or get a lot of people searching for things. Affiliate can be great because if you're searching for best credit card, best travel, best CRM, there's so many huge affiliate opportunities. There's a newsletter called The Daily Drop that's just like travel hacks. They have, it's like how to travel smarter, save money, all that stuff. They have 1 million subscribers, big business. They make almost all their money from credit card recommendations, and they get affiliate commissions on those. So you sign up for Chase's card, they'll get $300, and that's how they built their newsletter business. And so like all of it can work. It's again, like I said, the audience, and then what you can offer that audience and what monetization model fits into that. I could talk about all those if we want to get into it later, but I'm a fan of all of them. But just like my style is more direct stuff. Like I like having a product. I like having more control. I like owning everything from end to end. So that's the route that I've gone down.
And talking of you, I know you have run a couple of events as well, right? How was that experience?
Yeah, it's been great. Our business is kind of like we started with services, like done for you agency services. Then we went into educational courses. So I've done a lot of cohort based courses, which has probably been the most profitable thing we've ever done. And then we have events, which is live in person events. So I've done like one conference, which was in February. We're doing that same conference again next February, this coming February. I've done one retreat. And I've done a lot of other small events. The way we did it is like we did a happy hour. We're kind of like built up to the big conference. So we did a happy hour, then we did a live podcast, then we did a dinner, and like then we did the conference. And so it's hard to go straight to like a 300-person conference, but that was our big event that we're known for. So we had 300 people, about 20 speakers, sold 300 tickets, had about 4 sponsors. It was great. I think it did 6 figures in profits. It wasn't huge compared to our course business and agency business. That's actually small for us. But the reality is with events is it's definitely more something that you got to love, and I really enjoy it. I think it helps build your brand and credibility, like putting on something real and getting real experts there. And the money is really made in year 2 and 3 and after in events. Like the first event is more proof of concept. Sponsors don't really want to work with you because it's your first ever event. Like it could fail, it could burn down. Who knows what's going to happen for the first event? But year 2 and 3, you have that foundation, and that's where these can become big businesses. Like there's multi-billion-dollar events companies. I don't plan to get that big, but it's a model that definitely works.
Could you maybe kind of rank the products and services that you've done or that you've seen? And I guess maybe there's a couple of categories there to rank on. Obviously profitability, but also I imagine the event was a massive headache, right? And maybe some other kind of categories of ranking as well.
Yeah, most products don't cause like night sweats and night terrors like events do. But I think after you do one, you get less of that stress. Because we just finished like a retreat event with 50 people a month or two ago, and I had way less nerves for that than the conference that we did. But for me personally, so I almost put services in a different category because I all the things that we kind of talked about are I call them media products. So it's like you reach an audience in some way. It's courses, it's coaching, it's memberships, it's events. I put that into the category of media products. Services are services. Like it's a totally different dynamic. And service businesses can be great. They're just very different than media product businesses. So we've kind of slowed down on the agency stuff because we want to build more of a media business and less of an agency business. So I think services are great for getting to your first 100K. They're probably the fastest thing to scale to 7 figures in ARR, and I got there when I had like an audience of like 8 or 10,000 people. But I think going from like 1 million ARR to 10 million with services is just really tough because you have to add more clients. You just have to add more employees, and if you're someone who doesn't want to run an organization of hundreds of people over time, it's really tough. But to answer your question, I'm going long winded here. Like ranking media products, I would rank, in my experience, cohort based courses as number one because they have like a built in pre sale. So hopefully people know what these are. It's like, the cohort starting on this date. I'm going to teach it over 4 weeks. And like you have to buy it before it starts. So like there's a built-in pre-sale for your so your first cohort course, you can sell it and then create the content during the like teaching time. You don't have to like spend dozens of hours making a course and then hope to sell it afterwards. You sell it, get proof of concept, and then you teach it. I also like scarcity and urgency. So it's like, yeah, we have 50 spots, and enrollment ends on this date. Like you have to buy it by then or you can't get it. And that makes your marketing a lot more effective. So we've done definitely, I forget the numbers, but well over 1 million with cohorts. And the profitability is huge because it's just like you need like Zoom and you need some membership software and you need people to sell it to. You don't have to use paid ads. Like if you have 2,000 people on your email list, you can do a cohort based course and make a lot of money if you execute it well. Coaching and memberships is another option that's worked well for us. Like we have an advising and coaching program that's crushed it. I would say it's definitely harder because it's high ticket and you have to do phone sales to sell high ticket in like the tens of thousands of dollars. That's not great for beginners, but I think that's like a good, second or third product. I'm a big fan of low ticket digital products. I think a lot of people underestimate, selling like a really good, template or short book or super short course that you can sell for 50 or $100. And yeah, you got to get a lot of customers to make a lot of money, but that opens you up for so many future opportunities because if you get someone to buy something for $50 and they get value, they're 10 times more likely to buy your high ticket thing if you have it now or you're planning to have it in the future. So I think low ticket digital products are super underrated. And also people can like join your newsletter and they can buy them within 24 hours because it's such a low commitment. And then so those would be like my three, and then my number four would be events. I just think they're not for everybody. You have to love it. The biggest problem with events is your cash return cycle. So you're investing money up front in hopes of collecting that money and getting an ROI later. So you have to. There's exceptions to this. I'm sure it could be done in different ways, but like you have to book the venue and commit to your venue commitments, which is probably tens of thousands of dollars, or for us, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars just for a venue. You have to book the speakers and pay their deposits. You have to, put a lot of money up and then kind of hope you execute and get an ROI. And like we've done that. It's not rocket science, but it's a lot of kind of tedious work. And that's why I didn't do any events until I had a full-time employee that was just focused on events. And we couldn't afford that unless we had other products that were profitable first.
That's super interesting, Matt. My follow-up question to this is obviously you've got a very clear product suite, right? A whole bunch of different products that you've tried and have sold and are still selling. Is that what everyone should do?
No, no, not at all. We've tried to actually make it more focused because I don't do a great job explaining this now, but we're changing like our website and all this. So we're trying just to focus on three products. We have our cohort based course, we have our advising service, and we have our event. Like that's all I'm trying to focus on, at least publicly facing. I'm still going to do other things behind the scene, but like three is more than enough. I think I love the Alex Hormozy framework where he's like, one channel to get customers, one customer avatar, and then one product or service until you get to $1 million per year. And I've even heard him say $1 million per month, which I think is possible too. And so I would stick to that. Maybe you could add in two after you get to 50K per month or something, but I mean it really hampers your success.
Yeah.
And like I've talked to way more many people who have like one product and they're doing millions or tens of millions versus people who have people I talk to literally have 50 different products and they're struggling to do 10K a month, 20K a month, right? So that would be my advice.
I didn't notice agency services in those three.
We're just keeping that for like people who buy stuff from us,
Okay.
and we're making it more like we have a pretty small agency team. I don't want to have 100 clients. I've had a lot of clients before. I want to have like less clients to pay us more. So it's like, hey, if you buy one of our courses, one of our events, our advising program, we'll tell you about the agency afterwards because then you're more qualified to work with us and you're more likely to work with us too. I'm not saying if you're building an agency business, like it's just on agencies, obviously that doesn't make sense because you're not marketing yourself properly. But for us, that makes sense. And that's not my recommendation to everybody. That's just what we're doing now.
Okay, but your model is almost like the agency is super boutique, high end, work with a few clients and keep it kind of exclusive. Is that what you're saying?
It is now, but frankly, it didn't start that way because
Yeah.
when I started, all I had was the agency, and the agency was just me. And so we had a very simple model where it's like the same type of service for the same type of client, and kind of scale that horizontally, and get up to 30, 50 clients, and like make it productized, but don't make it sound custom, but behind the scenes it's productized. So we started that way. Everybody has the same fee too, which keeps things simple, and also it doesn't create concentration, because a lot of agencies have a problem where like one
Yeah.
client is 40% of their revenue. We That works too. Like what I did originally works. I just slowly moved away from that because I want to do more media stuff.
Okay. Is that a personal preference kind of based on your?
Absolutely. I'm more excited to build a media business than I am
Yeah.
a service based business, and there's that could be a financial detriment to me, But I think we'll be fine because I'm more passionate about it. But yeah, totally personal preference.
In terms of the sponsorships as kind of a product, how should someone that's getting started go about that? So maybe they've built up a list, posting organically, got some ads going, everything's going great. Now they want to monetize and they're looking at sponsorships. What are the kind of steps that someone should look at?
Yeah, I mean, sponsorships are amazing when you get to scale and they work. You know, Morning Brew and Hustle, like we're making like $80,000 every time we send an email or more, right? When you have these millions of subscribers, but that's when you get there. Kind of like anything, it's tough when you get started. So it's not totally unique in that way. But you have this chicken and egg problem where it's like I want to sell sponsors, but I need the audience to do so. And then to build the audience to do so, I need like more money to invest in growing my audience, or maybe money so I can quit my full time job so I can create more content to grow my audience. So this chicken and egg problem is really tough. And that's why having some type of direct monetization, even if it's just like a service, helps you get to the point where you could sell sponsorships in the future. But at least newsletter sponsorships, you really need an audience closer to 10 to 20,000 email addresses that have good engagement before you sell sponsorships. It used to be lower. And for some really high value B2B niches, it can be lower, maybe as low as 5 to 10,000, but you have to kind of get there first. And so initially, I would just focus on audience growth and one direct revenue stream to help me get to 10 to 25,000 or even 30,000. Because you don't want to like spend a lot of time trying to sell a $200 ad, and marketers don't want to buy a $200 ad because it's going to drive them like 10 leads and it's not worth their time. So it's a big challenge getting off the ground. But when you get to that threshold, hopefully by that point, like people who are in your industry are reading your content. And so when you advertise that you're taking on sponsors, you can get some inbound requests. Hopefully, some people so you can reach out to people in your network. And then you can start to reach out to people who are advertising or companies who are advertising other similar publications, other newsletters, other creators that are like you. And you can hopefully get a conversation, talk about what you have to offer. That's kind of the process. I think the key thing is if you can show that your audience is like already buying stuff from you, that helps you because it shows they actually buy stuff. So I think that's why I think direct monetization is important. If you show real audience data, we call this first party data from your post sign up survey, and it matches up to the type of people that advertiser wants to get in front of, that's super powerful, even if you have a small audience. So, like, because some of these advertisers are pretty niche, they're going after like people in the ag industry who work in this field, or like because they have a high ticket product. So, like, that's really powerful. And then if people are actually clicking your newsletter, like a lot of people write newsletters, there's just all text and there's nothing to click on. And the audience doesn't have a habit of clicking that email. But if you are already actively trying to direct them towards things and recommend products and sell your own stuff, they're already used to opening your email and taking action. That helps you sell sponsorships because the sponsors, they don't want to just get the impressions, they want to get clicks, they want to get leads, conversions, and sales. And if your newsletter ad doesn't lead to that, they're not going to work with you again. Um, and one of the first questions sponsors will ask outside of like who your audience is, how many ad clicks do you drive on average? And then they're going to do the math where they see, okay, if I get this many clicks, I'm going to get this many leads and this many sales. And if that math doesn't work out in their head or in their model, they're not going to buy from you. So you have to make that math work.
Makes sense. Just to summarize the first part, are you almost saying like unless you have super valuable people on your list, or you have a big list, maybe sponsorships is not the best way to get started for monetization?
I think you got to wait for 10 to 20,000 subscribers, maybe 5 minimum. But I mean, some of these niches are really lucrative. Like I have a friend who he has a newsletter of 21,000 subscribers, and it's all industry executives and leaders and a lot of CEOs in there too. And it's in a specific industry, which I can't say. And he will sell ads for about $3,000 to $4,000 per pop. he'll sell like a webinar package where he basically just hosts like a conversation with the sponsor, and he like drives registrations to it on Zoom. He'll sell that for $25,000 for a webinar, and he's got a seven figure or near seven figure advertising and partnership business with 21,000 subscribers, but they're the right 21,000 people who these vendors or advertisers want to get in front of. So that's kind of what it looks like for that type of folk.
I want to round things off by talking about acquisition. So I know you've worked at a few places and kind of had clients that have sold their newsletter business. I have kind of a few parts to this question. I want to kind of keep it fairly general. One, what is the kind of process to sell the newspaper? Two, what are kind of buyers looking for, or what makes a newsletter more valuable? And then the kind of ending part to this is just picking up on what you said before of a lot of things seem to change post acquisition, and you've kind of unsubscribed from a few newsletters that have been kind of sold or acquired. What do acquirers do wrong is that kind of final part. So yeah, over to you. Just
Yeah,
general thoughts on acquisition in the space.
I think I might need to repeat one as I keep going, but what I would say is, to preface, I haven't sold a business, and but I can tell you what I've seen from working in businesses that have been sold, and just from general principles about this stuff. And even people who have sold a business, they're not necessarily qualified to give you advice either, because a lot of people sell their businesses for like a 1x multiple, and it's basically an acquihire, and they just don't tell about that publicly. So, I mean, be careful with taking advice from people about this. But what I would say is like what acquirers are looking for. There's like the tangible things and there's the intangible things. So, if you heard of the Free Press, Barry Weiss, that company, the Free
Yep.
Press, just sold for $150 million, and it's basically like a newsletter publisher as a primary. That's their primary business, is newsletter publishing, like a membership. Um, that like they got valued at like a 10x revenue multiple, which is not normal for any companies, especially media companies. And there was a lot of more intangible things about they wanted to have Barry be the editor in chief at CBS, and like all these intangible things that are not just about dollars and cents and EBITDA and all that stuff. And that actually really matters. The Milk Road and the Hustle were both acquisitions where like I worked at those companies. I wasn't involved in negotiations, but like a lot of intangible things mattered. So if the Milk Road, the company that bought it, they were kind of a media company, but they were really good at like SEO and monetizing SEO traffic with affiliate offers. So they like got a lot of traffic from like ethereumprice.com, Bitcoin price, when people search those terms. But they had all these like SEO websites. They didn't have a brand. They own like ethereumprice.com. No one cares about that as a brand. And so they wanted to acquire a brand, and the Milk Road had built an incredible brand with a loyal audience and a cool logo and all that stuff. And so they cared a lot about that intangible thing. HubSpot, when they bought the Hustle, they cared a lot about the talent. Sam Parr and Sean Purry were amazing and are amazing podcasters. They had a lot of talented writers at the Hustle. HubSpot really only knew how to do like SEO content that was like really dry and boring. And the Hustle had all these fun, entertaining, quirky writers with a journalist background. And so they acquired a ton of talent, and they were able to move in the channels that they hadn't mastered before. So basically, HubSpot was all like paid ads or SEO. That's how they acquire leads and customers. The Hustle was obviously amazing at newsletters, and they were good at podcast too. And so now HubSpot is able to go from like a SEO business to a SEO, paid ads, podcast, and newsletter content business. And they expanded their media empire in a big way by acquiring the Hustle. And it wasn't really about the multiple as much. It was more of a strategic acquisition. So ideally, you want to be a strategic acquisition. You don't want to be a pure like private equity EBITDA focused acquisition, because you're going to get a higher EBITDA multiple if you're strategic. That's easier said than done. I'm very sure of it, but that's one thing. So like EBITDA multiples can vary a lot. That's really what people value businesses on, and it's no different for media business or newsletter businesses. A lot of people think, oh, they're going to look at my like subscriber count and give me like a dollar amount per subscriber, $5 for a subscriber, $30 for a subscriber. That doesn't happen at all. That only happens when people are just buying a database, and people buy databases for like pennies per email. So you don't want to sell your business as a database. So there's things that you can do to increase that multiple, because most businesses frankly sell at like a 1 or a 2x multiple, or sometimes even less. I kind of have 12 different tenets that are all about increasing that multiple and building a valuable business. One of the good things about this is like the things that make your business valuable for you as an owner are also the things that make your business valuable for an acquirer. It's like the same things. It's like the built to sell framework, which is a great book people should check out about building your business to sell. There's 12 tenets. So one is like you have to be able to have scalable audience acquisition. So you just can acquire, like, your audience is growing and it's not going to cap out. Like there's a bigger market for your content and you're able to run a process to keep growing the audience. Could be Facebook ads, could be YouTube, something else. Content market fit, people actually care about your content. If you're able to kind of like dominate the culture in your industry or niche because your content's that valuable, it's hard to, explain that with like a clear metric, but that's super valuable as content market fit. Sponsor content fit is like sponsors are buying. Over 50% of your sponsors are renewing if you have an advertising business. Product market fit is about you being able to sell a product successfully, have customer satisfaction, turn those customers into evangelists for your brand. People don't want to buy a media business if they've tried to like sell a product and they're converting like 0.1% of their free subscribers into paid customers. Like then they're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to sell anything to this audience myself. So product market fit really matters. First party data is super important. LTV to CAC ratio basically means, hey, if all the costs that go into acquiring a subscriber or a customer, what are they? So maybe it's $10 per subscriber, $5 per subscriber, and then what's the LTV? Is it $10? Then I have a low LTV to CAC. Is it, if I acquire subscribers for $5 and I make $50 over the lifetime of that, I have a very high LTV to CAC ratio, and so that's the unit economics of a business. And those are probably one of the most important things a acquirer looks at, other than EBITDA. You have to have great unit economics so that they can invest more money and grow the business. EBITDA margin is important. So like if you're operating at a 5% margin, that's not very attractive. If you're at 40, 50% or above, that's very attractive. Revenue retentions, like, do people buy from you again? Like after they buy one product, do they buy again next year? Do they renew the subscription? If you have no revenue retention, you're just always trying to fight to find new customers, and that's a big risk. And then I'll run through this quickly, single channel risk. So like if the business is only email or only Twitter, that's a risk. Key man risk. If the business is just like my face, for example, that's a risk for obvious reasons. Key client risk. This is where, like, 20% or more of your revenue comes from one source. So let's say it's like 40% is one big advertiser, or maybe 50% is just YouTube AdSense. Well, what if YouTube AdSense goes away? Or what if YouTube AdSense declines? What happens? So client risk is a big thing, or key client risk is a big thing. And that's more or less it. There's other things too that are intangible. But and people can find that article in the 12 tenants if they just search 12 tenants and read it. But it's like you're trying to like increase the value adders and reduce the risk things that I talked about, like key face risk, key client risk, single channel risk. And if you do a combination of that, you have a very sellable business. It's so much easier said than done because most people are just working on like tenant 1 through 3 for years. And another final thing I'll mention about that is like those tenants are in operational order. So you want to figure out how to do one first, then two, then three, etc. If you're starting from scratch and you're trying to remove the key face risk, like keep your face out of the business, like not have your face on social media or podcast, that's completely backwards because it doesn't matter yet because you have no value at all. You have, little revenue, little profit, right?
If you have a few minutes to stay on, I think the final part of that
Yeah.
question was, for acquirers, what are they doing wrong? Because you don't seem happy with some of the lists that you're on that got purchased.
It's tough, and HubSpot was I worked at HubSpot for about a year and a half after we were acquired, and they're great people. I think that's just really tough because we went from like a media business that we sold our own subscription called Trends that was like 15 million ARR. We sold ads, 20 million plus per year, and then HubSpot was like, well, we're a multi-billion-dollar company. We have $1 billion of cash in the bank. We don't care about your $20 million in ads. So we're going to lay off the entire sales team. And all the ads in the newsletter are just ads for HubSpot and ads for like different lead magnets that HubSpot had. They didn't really know what to do with Trends. Like they kept it around because it was $15 million in ARR and that paid for the entire Hustle team. Like they don't have to worry about additional budget for payroll and stuff because the Hustle team was like, 20 people or less. But they didn't really know how to like improve that product or grow it, and they gave us like no budget, and they kind of stopped us from doing things to grow Trends, and so eventually Trends died and got shut down. But Trends wasn't valuable to HubSpot because HubSpot wanted more leads for their CRM and like marketing software. So Trends was, a small group of, a couple thousand like entrepreneurs and paid members. It wasn't as valuable as a 2.5 million person newsletter and a massive podcast. So I think it was a big win for HubSpot. I think they got a lot out of it. Big financial ROI, big strategic ROI. They've done a great job growing the My First Million podcast and growing the podcast network. I think it would have done fine independently, but like they did a good job with that. What's challenge? I mean, that's one of the challenges. Like it's a different business model. Like instead of monetizing as a media business, now I'm just selling software. I'm a software salesperson. Like I'm doing content marketing for software. It's just that changes a lot of things because we're doing two different things now. And then getting everybody at the hustle on board with that is simple, but it takes time to do that. And a lot of people left. Like I think after like a year and a half, almost everybody who worked at the hustle was gone because it was a very different culture. It was a good culture, just different than the hustle. And then the final thing is, just content. Like when you're working at like a media company with 20 other people, and like your motto is like let your freak flag fly, and like this like cool vibe, and like it's intangible, but like you're trying to create cool, unique content. There's really no one to answer to. The hustle did a great job keeping the content team or the editorial team completely separate than the business side. So like they weren't on the marketing meetings. They didn't care about what the subscribers I was driving wanted. They wanted to write what they wanted to do as a journalist and what they felt was important to cover. Like it was very editorially separate, and I think HubSpot tried to do that too. But I think they just kind of swayed away from more controversial topics, almost like in a politically correct way. Like, oh, we don't want to cover anything political. We don't want to cover. We don't want to like punch down or punch up at tech companies that are doing bad things. When HubSpot has layoffs, I think there was like kind of a back and forth about should the hustle cover that HubSpot, a huge software business, had laid off 5% of the staff or whatever it was. I don't know the number, and you become less independent and like maybe compromised editorially. So all of like the really good journalists who work there, they didn't want to work for a SaaS company that um, had more editorial control. That they didn't feel like there was a separation of church and state there. They wanted to work for a media company, or they wanted to be independent, so they left. And that's the tough thing about making it work. I don't know. I don't have a perfect solution. I still think software companies can benefit a lot by buying media companies. These are just things that we need to think about when we do it. But I love HubSpot, by the way. They're great people.
It sounds like different goals, right, between the two companies, and unfortunately, it leads to a lot of change.
Yeah, and like I think it was totally financially successful. I think most people were happy
Hmm.
about the acquisition. They got treated well as employees. It's just like apples and oranges, and like how do you integrate them together? I don't know. Obviously, media companies buy media companies. That's worked forever. Um, but I think maybe the thing is like you just need to now realize that like you're no longer a media company. You're a content marketing arm for a software company, and maybe you just need to like accept that hard truth and like swallow it a little bit and just do the work. Um, so maybe that's the solution. I don't know.
Matt, thank you so much for coming on. I've learned a ton today, and I'm sure everyone that's listening and watching as well will have learned a ton. Where can people go to kind of follow you and hear more about what you're up to?
Yeah, everything is at newsletteroperator.com. So you can find my YouTube channel, obviously my newsletter there. That's where I post my most valuable content is people who are on my email list. So subscribe. And if you want to check out the event we're doing in February, that's not announced yet. But if you go to newsletter, because we're doing some actually changes, I don't want to say it yet. But if you go to newsletteroperator.com, you can get everything there. And I'm on YouTube, podcast, all that stuff.
Very cool. And Twitter as well. I definitely give you a recommendation over there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Matt, thank you once again for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Scaling an ecom brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.